Oh yeah.
Local Matters family. Today we are joined by Mr. Erick Montgomery. He is with Historic Augusta, and we are going to discuss the role of Historic Augusta. I know on some instances here lately they have become the bad guys, so to speak, at least in the estimation of some. And I want Erick to have an opportunity to really explain what their role is and how they go about carrying out the mission. How are you doing today, Erick?
I'm just fine. Thank you for inviting me to be on this.
Thank you so much. We have actually done a couple of episodes over the last few years related to historic structures. One in particular, I had an architect on a year or two ago. And he talked about some fantastic ideas for adaptive reuse of older structures. And it seems like there was another one in there, but this is something that I've wanted to talk about for a while. I think the impetus for me this time around was what happened to my beloved Hornsby Elementary School. But before we get into that, I want to ask you just to describe your role at Historic Augusta and what the organization's mission is.
Right. I have been executive director of Historic Augusta for this is in my 36th year. And I'm the executive director, which means that I'm the administrative head of the organization. We do have a board, a large board, and then a smaller part of that board that's the regular governing body. But Historic Augusta has been around since 1965. And so we're in our 60th year now, and I've been here since 1989.
All right, very good. And what background does one have that gets them prepared for a role like this?
I have a degree in historic preservation from Middle Tennessee State University, and I'm among the oldest people you can possibly meet that have that kind of degree. But it was something I just fell into. I liked history, but I didn't want to teach. And then I learned about this as a junior in college and changed my major, and it's what I've been doing ever since. But you wouldn't necessarily have to have a preservation degree to do what I do. A lot of people don't, but something that like public administration would might be helpful, or uh, history, as long as you had an interest and some understanding of historic buildings and historic architecture, would help too.
Okay. And tell me, did you have a similar role before you came to Historic Augusta?
Yes, what I've always done. Right out of college, I got a job as a historic preservation planner in Southwest Georgia, and did that for I don't know, about 3 years, I think. And then I got a job as director of a historical organization in Albany, Georgia, called Thronotisa Heritage Foundation. And then after that, Thomasville Landmarks, which is really the same as Historic Augusta, but a smaller city. Um,
Mhm.
and then I became a preservation consultant, working located in Savannah, but I worked in around Georgia and Florida and Alabama mostly. And then I came here to Augusta in 1989.
Okay. So you worked at several organizations. You know, I used to live in Albany, so I fondly remember Thronotisa.
Do you?
All right. Yes.
Yeah, the
Yes.
train station.
Mhm. Um, you have a background in historic preservation and have been connected to it for a lifetime, it sounds like.
That's about right. Yeah.
Yeah. And that must feel good too to carry out your life's calling in that way. So you get to Augusta, the organization had been around, you said, since the mid 60s.
Right.
Yeah, and I didn't realize that. And the primary focus, your elevator speech for what Historic Augusta does is.
So, Historic Augusta's mission is to preserve historic sites and structures in Augusta and Richmond County, Georgia. In more recent years, we will go out into the CSRA when we're asked. For instance, I had a consultation in Aiken yesterday, but most of it is concentrated in Augusta and Richmond County. Um, and we're a nonprofit, 501c3, so we're supported by donations fundraising events. Um, we do have some earned income that when we can get it. And those are the main sources of income. We have no government funding for operating expenses. Not that I wouldn't take it, but we don't have any. We don't have any local, state, or federal funds for operating expenses at this time, and haven't for quite some time.
Okay. All right. And that brings me to a point. There've been a couple of issues that have come up over the last 6 months. And I know there's always something, but a couple of things that caught my attention over the last 6 months, one of which probably didn't get any public attention. It became a source of consternation for those of us in East Augusta, all of us that attended W.S. Hornsby Elementary School. I graduated from Hornsby. I was one of the few, not everybody, some people went there for, 5 years, 6 years. I was there for all seven. So I spent my entire elementary school life at W.S. Hornsby Elementary School, and I live in Hornsby subdivision, um, in a house that my father purchased exactly 70 years ago. So the area is near and dear to my heart. And folks who know me know that I've been involved in some preservation efforts in the neighborhood as well. And we drove by and we saw these bulldozers, some pieces of heavy equipment in the yard at what used to be Hornsby. And to clarify, Hornsby was no longer owned by the school system. At the time it was demolished, it had been sold to somebody else, and they renamed the old Sandbar Ferry Elementary School Hornsby. And what was East Augusta Middle School, we renamed that as Hornsby Middle School. But so the school system didn't own it anymore. It was owned, I think, by a religious organization of some sort. Hadn't seen a lot of activity over there in the last few years. And we see bulldozers. And that prompted me to get my cell phone out and take some photos before it was all gone. So fortunately, I was able to get a few photos, and I posted those on my Facebook page. Um, and we just wonder, I know every building can't be saved due to the expense associated with doing that, but is there anything that could be done? Is there anything that is set up to prevent that sort of thing? I mean, what are our options?
Yeah. So in the case of uh, privately owned property, which that had become, um, the owner or the city could designate it as a historic resource under the Augusta Historic Preservation Ordinance. And what that would mean is that any alterations, new construction, or demolition of the historic structure would have to go before the Historic Preservation Commission to be approved or not approved. And now that if the school board had owned it, um, that they may or may not have been able to do that, because um, in fairly recent years, they got a ruling saying that city-owned property did not have to go before the Preservation Commission, except as in an advisory capacity, but they don't really have to do what the Preservation Commission says. And even individuals, let's say that it had been designated as a historic building, which it was not, but let's say it had been, if the owners didn't agree with the decision of the Historic Preservation Ordinance, Historic Preservation Commission, they could appeal that. And so ultimately it may have been torn down anyway. So the only really surefire way of preserving a building is through a historic preservation easement, which would be assigned to an organization like Historic Augusta. And that what that means, it works similar to the Historic Preservation Ordinance, but yet it's specific to a building, and they have to ask us or whoever holds that ordinance before they can do demolition.
Okay.
So it's
And
very unfortunate, but usually it takes some advocacy from either the owner, or if the owner's not interested, the neighborhood to make these things happen.
okay. And that's even it would had to have been designated as a historic, what was the historic resource? What was the term you used?
Under the local historic preservation ordinance, it would have had to have been designated as a historic site resource.
Okay. All right. Okay. And yeah, and of course
And
nobody, I guess, had the foresight to do that.
it could have
Um,
been, the school board, I think, sold a lot of several buildings in
mhm,
recent years. I can't remember all of them, and they didn't sell them all. But like my children went to Forest Hills Elementary, the two oldest ones.
mhm.
Like you, my older son went all the way through Forest Hills as far as it went. He was the last class that did that, but
Okay.
they flattened that. And now they're flattening um, right next to it, Langford.
Langford. Yeah, I drove by
And
there yesterday and it's like, okay, Langford's gone.
but there's no protection there. There's no, it's not under the preservation ordinance. There's no easement. So there's no legal way to try to stop any of that.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. I wish that, we had known since when Hornsby went into private ownership, there's just no way to know. I'll think twice now if I see something else go into private ownership like that, trying to get it designated as a historic resource. I thought about, I took pictures. One of my neighbors went over there and got a few bricks. So at least he could say he had a couple of bricks from the
Mhm.
building. And one of our neighbors who passed away last year had been principal of the school for a few years. So her children believe they may have some photos somewhere in the house of the
Mhm.
building. So that's all we can hope for now is to get some photos. Maybe check with the school system as you advised me we were offline to see if I could get something. But yeah, it's just pretty shocking. And it feels like a portion of your life has been taken away when you see that happen.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're a preservationist at heart.
I am. I am. That's why I live in a 70-year-old house.
It's
I,
tough. It's
I
tough to see them
really
go.
am.
You can't
I,
always have any
mhm,
power over what happens.
mhm, mm-mm. And and there's a certain feeling, to be honest, in the Augusta area that certain historic landmarks in the African American community have been allowed to disappear, Immaculate Conception School being one of those. And I know there's a really nice multifamily development going up on that property right now. And I'm really looking forward to that. And I see that as a net improvement to the neighborhood. But yeah, it disappeared. For whatever reason, I don't know if it was a monastery. I can't remember. Help me. Is it on 12th Street?
Right.
There's a big red brick building that looks
Yeah.
like it's been empty for probably 50 years or something. You know what I'm talking about?
Well, yeah, it hadn't been really empty, but it looks like it. But
Hmm.
so that's St. Benedict boarding school originally, and originally part of of Immaculate Conception. But I can tell you a little bit about what happened in Immaculate Conception. We had put the school building and the church on our endangered properties list, and I can't tell you what year. It was a long time ago now.
Hmm.
And we advocated for that. We worked with the Alumni Association,
Hmm.
um, and so what occurred was that the housing authority wanted to put up. It's not what ended up there now, but they wanted to put up a senior housing development.
Hmm.
And that was fine with us, but we couldn't understand why they couldn't use the old buildings and repurpose them as part
Hmm.
of that. And they could even add some other buildings. Um, they didn't want to do that. And we had a meeting at the Housing Authority, and we just had a serious disagreement. And so the Housing Authority said, well, we're just not going to do it here at all. We're just going to pull out and not do anything, not here. And eventually they shifted over to the Twiggs Circle project.
Hmm.
But so as soon as that happened, the bishop of the Roman Catholic Church is in Savannah. And he, as I understand it, he said, tear it down, just tear it all down. And he and that's what they did. So the church actually tore it all down, and then eventually, I guess they sold it to the city through the I don't know what entity of the city. I don't know if it was the
Yeah, housing and community development.
yeah, and
Mhm.
they're the ones that built back the apartments across the street. But that was very unfortunate because that the church and the school, and certainly at least the church, could have been repurposed as part of that original development.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
again, Historic Augusta, we advocated for it, we argued for it, we tried our best to talk them into doing it, but we have no authority. We had no easement
Right.
on that property. It was not designated as historic by the city. Um, so sometimes you're just powerless to, you can't just will that something's done. It's, the owner has rights. And you may disagree with that, with what they plan to do, but you can't always have much effect on it. In certain designated areas, there can be, but not in that specific case, no. Now, the property you're talking about on 12th Street is a
Mhm.
wonderful building and it needs to be preserved. It was it had been in private hands for many, many years, and it was basically used as a storage facility for their rental properties. So I've been in it at least twice, maybe three times, and you could hardly walk. There's so much stuff in there, but it was all there and intact. Basically, it had some, there were probably some leaks here and there, but now I understand that the land bank has bought that, and I'm not exactly sure what their plans are. They tend to buy things and hold them until a developer comes along. And I've talked to a lot of people about it over the years, but right now I don't know exactly what the plan is.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I hope somebody does do a really neat adaptive reuse project
It's a
for that
cool
structure.
building. It's
Yeah.
really cool. It's got classrooms, what were originally classrooms. It's also got this two-story auditorium type room
Hmm.
and closest to Laney Walker Boulevard. Uh, and I don't know if all the stuff is still in it or not. You could have a tremendous yard sale over there.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for that update, which then leads me to the one that's really been controversial, and that is the First Baptist Church site on Green Street. That is what, 8th and Green? Is that right?
8th and Green, yes, 802 Green Street.
Yeah. I, what's going on there?
Yeah, so again, we have this endangered properties list, and it has no authority or we can't
Mhm.
force anybody to do anything, but we list things every year in the fall to bring attention to needs of historic buildings in Augusta. And that was listed several years ago. Um, and the current owner bought it, I think, with good intentions, and I worked with him initially quite a bit on it with his intention of doing a historic preservation tax credit project. Um, but the particularly the dome and the walls and the old sanctuary have were leaking and are leaking as far as I know, and were causing a lot of damage and it just looked worse and worse. And from time to time, vegetation grew up on it. It was just a real eyesore, but an absolutely beautiful building. It's a Beaux-Arts style building. It's the best example, in my opinion, in Augusta of that style. And so the Historic Preservation Commission uh, kind of called him on it and said, "You need to tell us what you're doing with it and what's your plan." And there was a hearing, and he got upset. Well, he owns a newspaper, so he went to war with them, and then with us, and then with against me specifically. So
Hmm.
it's been an interesting situation. Most recently, he went to the Preservation Commission last month, or in April 2025, and proposed that he would take off the I call it a cap on top of the dome, which is where a lot of the infiltration of water is coming. And the Preservation Commission, he'd take it off and then roof over it as a temporary measure just to stop the leaking, which he says it's not leaking, but that I can't believe that's true because it's gaping holes. But in any case, that was approved. So we hope he will follow through with doing what he said, and it won't fix the whole thing, but it'll be a step in the right direction.
Did he, at one point, he had proposed demolishing the building altogether, correct?
Well, after that hearing, he did. Uh,
Okay.
Went back to the Preservation Commission, said, okay, well, my solution is to demolish it. But demolishing it would cost as much, probably more than repairing not restoring the whole thing, but at least stopping the leaks, which is expensive. I mean, it's an expensive proposition any way you look at it. But speaking of Immaculate Conception, it's right up next to their current school. You know,
It is, right.
after
Uh-huh.
IC moved over to Telfair Street, they took the old one of the Baptist Sunday School buildings, and so the old First Baptist Church is leaking the roof is leaking into the school building
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
adjacent,
Okay.
and so that's been part of the controversy too, and it's been going on for a long time. So it'll just, it'll we hope it'll all work out. And we don't care if he restores it, rehabs it, he sells it to somebody else that will. We just want it to be preserved. Um, and it is now, we talked about local designation, but it is individually listed on the National Register of Historic Places.
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
that does not really protect it from anything other than federal projects, but nevertheless, it demonstrates that it is a very significant historic building and it needs to be preserved. Um, Something like Hornsby Elementary could have been listed to be on the National Register. You just need to be 50 years old, but that has to be generally instigated by the property owner. So that would have either been the school board when they owned it or the new owner at that time. Some of our schools are on the National Register individually,
Mhm.
like Richmond Academy and Tubman School are both individually listed on the National
Okay.
Register. Maybe others are in National Register districts. Those two immediately come to mind.
Okay. All righty. And thank you for that. Yeah, I know the Hornsby situation was also complicated by the fact that I think there is some soil contamination or something else going on at that site. But the last time I drove by there, which was yesterday afternoon, it appears as if there had been a building built after the private entity acquired the campus, and they seem to be operating a CrossFit gym out of that. So apparently they're not too afraid of the contamination in the property because they're still right there in that area. Um,
Contamination can figure into things sometimes, like the old Trinity CME Church, Mother
mhm.
Trinity. That was all about contamination. And even though that hasn't been fully restored yet, at least we saved it. We got it moved across the street
Across the street. Hmm.
to ground that had been already mitigated and taken the contamination out. And
And
there, go
I was
ahead.
going to say, as you bring that one up, do you know if there are any plans for redevelopment of that structure?
There are plans in a way, maybe not very specific plans. There have been all kinds of studies done. There was a great overall study about it that the Canal Authority, who owns it now, had done. And they do have a large grant that they can work on now. First, the roof needed repair, and I see they've kind of done some stopgap work now.
Hmm.
Um, Unfortunately, the Canal Authority has had a sad change in its leadership,
Hmm.
and so I'm not quite sure. Tyler Sneed was the former director, who's now deceased, but he was working on that, uh, but just kind of getting started on next steps. So I guess they've got to regroup at this point. But
Okay.
it is
Yeah.
safe. It is safe. It's in the hands of people that won't allow it to be torn down. And the roof is more or less dried in now. We need a permanent roof on it, but uh, and it survived the hurricane apparently. So
Yeah.
I was shocked that
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot of things
Fortunately.
died. Yeah.
Fortunately. Yeah, and I guess there aren't many trees over there anymore because
No.
since they had to remediate all the land, they dug up whatever trees that were there, I guess, at that time.
Yeah.
Okay.
The wind could have gotten it, but yeah.
Yeah. Is there, we're quickly out of time. We talked so much about all of these structures. One question I do want to ask on the Historic Preservation Commission, who appoints those board members?
Each city commissioner has an appointment. So
Okay.
10, there are 10 commissioners, and they are appointed by their city commissioner
Okay.
according to the ordinance, and I guess it's the way the city charter works. I don't know. You know that
Okay.
better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's what it is. I just wanted to bring that out. I know we've talked about some things that have not been preserved, things that either torn down or have not been repaired. As you look back over your 30 plus years with Historic Augusta, what are some of the greatest success stories and some of the things that you're most proud of?
Well, personally, not too long after I got here, the the crisis du jour was the Woodrow Wilson Boyhood Home was
Mm.
up for public auction. That was in 1991, and we were able to buy it. The city did give us some SPOS money to go to the auction, and we bought it. And of course, everybody thought the federal government would come in because it was a president's home, but
President. Yeah.
couldn't be farther from the truth. But but it took us 10 years, but we got it. And that's a real long story, but we got it studied and preserved and opened to the public as a house museum. And then shortly after that, we bought, well, during that time, we bought the house next door where I'm sitting now, the Joseph
Mhm.
Lamar Boyhood Home. He was a Supreme Court justice. They were best friends when they were growing up here in Augusta. So it's a pretty remarkable story. Um, and so we were able to get that. So that's a great success story. Another one, Union Baptist Church on Green Street at the corner of 11th. Um, that is you may not have enough time for me to go into that, but that's been a project that we have adopted over many years, and always working on it. And but it's won really top awards uh, from the Georgia Trust, and it's beautiful. But buildings always need work. They're just historic buildings always need more work. So you think you're done, but you're never really done. You just
Mhm.
or then you get hit by a hurricane
Yes.
or have a fire. Union Baptist Parsonage had a fire, and we had to recover from that. So these things happen, but sometimes it takes a while, and then you're ongoing with issues.
Okay. All right. One other project I'll bring up was what is the current site of the Augusta Jewish Museum?
Right, and you worked with me as well on
Hmm.
that. Yeah,
Hmm.
that was as you know, the city was really didn't quite understand what they had there. And so we
We
brought,
didn't.
brought it to
We
their
didn't.
brought it to their attention, and it took a number of meetings and a lot of public folks coming and standing up. And Historic Augusta, we showed up, and then we realized that the Jewish community was showing up too, and so we kind
Hmm.
of joined forces and worked out a deal, largely thanks to you when you were city administrator. There was a 5-year lease, and if we met certain benchmarks in those 5 years, then the city would deed both the synagogue and the Court of Ordinary to Historic Augusta. And that's what happened. And we got that done in 2021 was when it was deeded over. And then we shortly thereafter deeded it to the Jewish Museum. And the reason it was to us is because we were an existing long-term stable organization, and the Augusta Jewish Museum didn't really exist yet, but they do now.
Hmm.
And
Right.
they've finished the Court of Ordinary building and still have the synagogue to be completed, but they've got to raise a lot of money for that. But that's on their radar.
Yeah, and it's going to take quite a bit of money to make that happen, but I certainly hope that they're able to come through with that. As an office building, which is what it was used for at the time I arrived, it was an absolute disaster. It was just absolute just no way. Our planning department was operating out of there,
Mhm.
and the building had zero attention, and they had this god awful quote unquote elevator that had been
Outside.
attached to the outside of the building. It's like, oh my goodness, what is that contraption? So
Mm.
I'm glad that we were able to work that out. And to preserve Jewish history because it's quite significant in the state, not just an Augusta thing, but a statewide thing. That building was quite significant. So I'm glad we were able to work that out. But yeah, there's just so many, it feels so hit or miss, I think, in terms of what gets preserved and what doesn't.
Well,
Um,
and it probably is, but if there was a more comprehensive um, plan by the city itself, we don't
mhm,
have any power. The city has the power.
right, right.
So I'd be glad to chat with people about that because that's something that's definitely needed. Some cities do more with it than others.
Yeah.
Uh,
So the best you all can do is to advocate for
right.
certain things, but the decisions are not yours. And certainly the
And
resources aren't yours.
in many cases, yeah, that they're seldom are sold. We just have to advocate and ask for things.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you wish people knew about what Historic Augusta does?
Well, I hope people will know that a lot of times people just know us as they think we do parties all the time. Well, that's the visible public
Mhm,
um, face because we have to raise money. We don't have government funding. We don't have
mhm,
a steady source of income. We have to raise money all the time. So we're not just the party people. But we do through those parties we like to showcase historic buildings and hopefully people will understand their value. Um, but we have so many. We have our fingers in most any pie. Everything you've asked me about, I knew something about because we
mhm.
either been actively involved or at least knew about it and had been consulted on it. So right now I have about 20 projects that private entities are doing that we are helping with to use various tax incentives and things to ensure their preservation. So we're always working on lots of things around.
All right, that's great. Thank you so much for your contributions to preserving Augusta's history. I know there are some cities that do an outstanding job with maintaining the historic character, and others you would think they were built 15 years ago because there's not one single old building left
That's
uh,
true.
when you go into some of them. So we certainly appreciate your efforts to preserve key landmarks in Augusta.
Well, thank you. We try our best.